Oh, no sound. No sound. What a catastrophe. What a catastrophe. What a catastrophe this whole live stream experience has been. Oh my god. Okay. 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 I'm gonna start again as if I just started the stream. Okay? Hey everybody, how you doing today? This is me, the Canadian Commie, live streaming over on YouTube. If you would like to participate, just head on over to www.thecanadiancommie.com. Gets you into the YouTube stream where I talk to people who comment. We answer questions, have discussions, go back and forth. You hear my thoughts, I hear your thoughts about the decline of Western civilization, what can be done about it, what we should do about it, how we should act about it, raising each other's awarenesses about the fraudulence of the entire system that we exist within, and how we could build parallel systems. Did you know that? That if everybody just decided, hey, you know the electoral system, forget about it. We could just do something else, right? And if everybody decided that was the case, that's basically what would happen. They would cry about it a little bit, I think, but then it would happen. So if you want to participate in that discussion, head on over to www.thecanadiancommie.com. And if you would like to donate to financially support this endeavor and what we're doing, please head on over. It's in the description, www.patreon.com/thecanadiancommie. Every little bit helps. Donate even $1 gets you into the Discord so that when they begin to strip people like me of our First Amendment rights or of our charter rights, I'm a Canadian after all, you'll know where to find me. Thank you. Thank you for being here, each and every one of you. Eric, Peanut Butter Beatrice, Gabriel, Eggsd, Kevin, Austin Wallace, Conton, good to see each and every one of you. What a disaster. I had to start and stop the stream once, and then I had to restart the whole thing once because I didn't have my sound enabled. Oh, I just got myself into a tizzy. Timothy J. Bowlby, good to see you, my friend. Good to see you guys. Oh, and I forgot to say in my whole pitch, please like, share, subscribe, hit those bells, hit those whistles. Be sure to hit the like button. Moreover, tell people I exist. If you've got a friend in your life being like, man, I like listening to podcasts. When I game, I like to listen to a podcast. But I'm getting sick and tired of listening to Joe Stupid Face Rogan and his dumb takes. Maybe send this recommendation their way. Only you can prevent forest fires. Which was terrible advice, by the way. But that's fine. That's fine. Austin, I was wondering why it took a bit. I straight up got caught talking to my neighbor downstairs. I have no excuse. I literally was like, gonna take my dog down to have a final pee before the stream. Got talking to my neighbor. And that's it. No big story. Nothing crazy. Eric writes, it's absolutely insane that we still have to debate food, shelter, healthcare, aka things that we need for our physiology, need to survive, our basic rights. Yeah. And Eric continues, I also had a fascist telling me that capitalism cares for human rights, but communism doesn't, while supporting the Palestinian genocide. Yeah. Just incoherence, right? Like I'll say it again and again and again, and again and again and again. And again and again and again. Capitalism is a death cult. It is a religious organization. It's a religious ideology, right? And religious ideologies are, by their very definition, incoherent and contradictory, right? That if they weren't incoherent and contradictory, they would just be science, right? That's why Marxists understand how the system of capitalism works, and capitalists don't. Because capitalists believe in a religious ideology, and Marxists don't. Just Me continues, have you heard of the concept of the Iron Triangle? The Iron Triangle. What's the Iron Triangle? U.S. politics. Oh, here we go. I'm just going to click on any of these. Oh yeah, this is... I mean, I haven't heard it described as the Iron Triangle, but this is essentially what we've been discussing the entire time, right? You have Congress at the top of the triangle, which gives friendly legislation and oversight to interest groups who give congressional support via lobby to bureaucracies, which extend policy choices and execution to Congress. And so this is an iron triangle that reinforces itself. This is very similar to XD writes, Iron Triangle, more like Iron Cross. You got it, bud. This is somewhat similar to the idea that I have, which is the three pillars of the unholy trinity of the capitalist death cult. I talked about that a lot in the past. I haven't really been talking about it that much anymore, but it's definitely something that I think is absolutely true, which is that capitalism, the religious ideology of capitalism, has a reinforcing triangle, a triangle that goes the worship of money, the worship of the self, and the worship of chaos. And that's a reinforcing triangle, much like this iron triangle is a reinforcing triangle. And that capitalists believe in that ideology in the same way that a fundamentalist does. And so once one pillar goes, all three go. And I mean, it's a belief system that's incoherent, right? It doesn't make any sense. Like, literally, capitalists believe that they are gods. In the most... like, literal of terms. They think that the universe revolves around them. They don't have a conception of community. They don't have a conception of any like, they have main character syndrome at the highest possible level. They literally think everybody else is here just for their amusement and for no other reason. That's why destroying people is completely fine, right? Because you're not actually humans. I'm the only human. Duncan Stamp 23 over on Twitch, where I also stream. Hey, the Canadian commie. What's up? I went to the gym today, my man. That's what I did. I went to the gym today. I'm really proud of myself, actually. I haven't been to the gym for a week because I got sick, and is the heat. I think I got like a touch of heat sickness. Not drinking enough water, not taking care of myself the way I needed to take care of myself. I'm also a depressive, so anytime I get sick or anytime there's that kind of thing, I also fall into a pretty deep depression. And so climbing myself back out, got to the gym, feeling a lot better about myself. Gym. And then you continue and you say, I asked before, I do apologize. If I asked before, I do apologize. No need to apologize, Duncan. It's okay to ask questions more than once. That just means you want to hear the answer again. And believe me, dude, I say the same thing over and over and over again on this channel all the time. Because people come in and they've got NPC brain, right? They're just like, name me one time communism has ever worked. Anyway, sorry. You know what? I'm in a good mood. I don't even care. I'm going to be honest about it. I'm in a real good mood. Today's going to be a good stream. I can tell. Cue the Nazis to come in. Here's their opportunity. There was one thing I really wanted to start. Okay, I'm completely avoiding your question, dude, and I'm so sorry. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it right now. Your question is, do you play D&D? I used to do a lot of dungeon mastering, which is to say I ran the games. And that's the reason I stopped playing D&D, is because I couldn't find anybody who wanted to be the dungeon master. And I got sick of being the dungeon master, and I wanted to play. And then I found, like, Baldur's Gate 3 was good enough, right? And I'm, like, a wizard, right? The beer's not just for show, everybody. I have magical powers. Woke CIA drone pilot, the Canadian commie is rising. I hope so, dude. I hope so. You can help out by liking the stream and donating. Duncan says, oh, you know, I really wanted to ask you something. Would a Star Wars evil D&D campaign maybe interest you to join as a player? It's a political strategy theme, is why I must ask. Sure, dude. Yeah, whatever. Let's go. I'm gonna warn you right now. Okay? I'm a weirdo. So I'm not just gonna be like a human fighter, you know? Or whatever. So I wanted to actually read this because it's just so nice. It's just so nice. It's just so nice to see Elon Musk get completely dunked on by his daughter. His daughter literally just took to Twitter and absolutely dumpster fired him. Like, just absolutely beautiful. So, she is going by the handle The Villainous. There's a lot of stuff I need to debunk, which I will get to. Don't worry. But I want to start with what I find the funniest, which is the notorious, slightly autistic tweet. This is going to be a bit, so just bear with me. Here's Elon Musk's original tweet. Blanking out the villainous's name. Was born gay and slightly autistic. 2 attributes that contribute to gender dysphoria. I knew that from when he was about 4 years old and he would pick out clothes for me to wear, like a jacket, and tell me it was fabulous, as well as his love of musicals and theater. But he was not a girl. So, his daughter is a trans woman, right? And here's Elon Musk dead naming her and then using the he pronoun. Super supportive, right? Super supportive as a father, right? If this is how he treats the people who he literally spawned into the world, how do you think he thinks about you? Ha ha! The Villainous says, this is entirely fake. Like, literally none of this ever happened. Ever. I don't even know where he got this from. My best guess is that he went to the Milo Yiannopoulos School of Gay Stereotypes, just picked out some at random and said, good enough, in a last-ditch attempt to garner sympathy points, when he is so obviously in the wrong, even in his own fucking story. I did not have a love of musicals and theater when I was 4, because, you know, I was fucking 4. I did not know what these things were. My earliest real experience with musicals was when my twin brother had a Hamilton phase in the 8th or 9th grade and overplayed it so much in the car to the point where for a long time I swore off the entire genre. I never picked out jackets for him to wear, and I was most certainly not calling them fabulous because literally, what the fuck? I did not use the word fabulous when I was 4 because once again, I would like to reiterate, I was 4. Like, this is so obvious, I don't even think it warrants explanation, but apparently people believe this nonsense, so here I am. This entire thing is completely made up, and there's a reason for this. He doesn't know what I was like as a child because he quite simply wasn't there. And in the little time that he was, I was relentlessly harassed for my femininity and queerness. Obviously, he can't say that, so I've been reduced to a happy little stereotype, effing along to use at his discretion. I think that says a lot about how he views queer people and children in general. As for if I'm not a woman, sure, Jan, whatever you say. I'm legally recognized as a woman in the state of California, and I don't concern myself with the opinions of those who are below me. Obviously, Elon can't say the same because in a ketamine-fueled haze, he's desperate for attention and validation from an army of degenerate red-pilled incels and pick-me's who are quick to give it to him. Go touch some fucking grass. Somebody responds, extremely shocked to hear this D-bag is a liar. Hope you're not too bothered by what he says about you. The Villainous responds, I'm not. LOL. I've just started to find it funny at this point. Calling me dead on a podcast with Jordan Peterson, of all people, while basically admitting you have zero reading comprehension by saying you were tricked into signing documents that you read over multiple times, is basically a parody of itself. Like, it's honestly camp. I just loved it. I just love it. Duncan, over on Twitch, You want to befriend a commie? That's wonderful. I think commies are misunderstood. Duncan says, so we play in Discord via voice and video. We plan to start in late August. That's a possible schedule. Duncan, I do have a Discord, but that's for donators. That's for people who actually donate. Just send me an email, all right, bud? jmichael, Michael Sanderson @gmail.com. I'm fine putting that out there because it's in my description in the YouTube. So just send me that email, okay, bud? No, and you just added me in Discord because I have the same name and you just searched me. Yeah. There you go, bud. Nerdery. Nerdery. Nerds. 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 So, this is all fun and well and good. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of what the show is really about today. Just Me continues about the concept of the Iron Triangle. He says, it's the one I'm talking about. The government gives to the military who gives to private corporations. Yeah. Like, that's the same kind of idea, but, like, that's the thing. Like, the modern conversation really is, like, where does power actually lie in the United States? Who's actually calling the shots, right? And so people have different thoughts and ideas about that. If you're like a right-wing libertarian, you think it's the government, right? If you maybe are a far left Occupy person, for example, you might say corporations, right? And then, of course, there's the line that, like, no, military-industrial complex, right, runs the show. More and more as I learn, the answer is nobody. Nobody is actually running the show. There's literally nobody whose job it is to do it, right? So it's everybody is just running on principles, right? And capitalists do have principles. They're just evil, and their principles are rooted in the idea, right? I've talked about it already on this stream. Hold on, 1 second. Capitalist principles are the worship of money, right? That as long as what you're doing is making money, it is good. Doesn't matter what you're doing, right? Send the CIA to go assassinate children on the streets of Afghanistan. Did you make money doing it? Then good. The worship of the self, right? That I'm the most important person in the world. That it is completely possible for a single individual to overwhelm the power of all other individuals, the institutions of those individuals, as well as the forces of reality itself, right? It's a hysterical, completely out of touch with reality belief that all capitalists believe. That's why all capitalists intrinsically believe that they're just temporary, embarrassed billionaires. We don't want to raise taxes on billionaires because I will be a billionaire at one point. That's absolutely going to happen for sure. And obviously it's going to happen because I'm the most important thing in the world, right? If this sounds like selfishness, congratulations, welcome to capitalism. And then, of course, the third pillar is the worship of chaos, which they'll call the free market. Libertarians are big believers in chaos, right? That let chaos reign and the free market will decide is the same statement. It's the same idea. And so because capitalists, whether they're in the military, whether they're in Congress, whether they're in a corporate power structure, like whether they're Bill Gates, right? As long as they believe in this idea of capitalism, which they all do, then it means that there isn't anybody in charge. And there is like a reinforcing system and they're all moving forward based on these principles. And as long as you're in that wheelhouse, then they do reinforce one another, right? That the government passes legislation for corporate power who upholds the military-industrial complex. Like, it all works together, right? Just Me says the Iron Triangle is the Congress passes legislation to help private military contracts. and gives money to the military to spend on those private contractors. It's money laundering. Yeah. There are many different money laundering systems. The one that's really big here in Canada is the money laundering that happens through the housing market. Yeah, Duncan, if you're looking at the Canadian commie on Discord and it's got the same maple leaf that you see here, that's me. Just send me a message there, okay, my man? I don't know, sounds fun, sounds interesting. Nerds. Eric says, just found an amazing quote from Noam Chomsky. Just think about it for a minute. Almost everybody spends most of their life living in a totalitarian system. It's called having a job. When you have a job, you're under total control of the masters of the enterprise. They determine what you wear, where you go to the bathroom, when you go to the bathroom, what you do. The very idea of a wage contract is selling yourself into servitude. These are private governments. They're more totalitarian than governments are. Then the interview says, but they can't legally murder you or imprison you. Chomsky responds, they can't legally murder you, but they can control everything that you do. Interviewer says, well, again, the right-wing libertarian argument, well, you're free to leave at any time. Chomsky responds, yes, you're free to starve. That's exactly right. You have a choice between starving or selling yourself into tyranny. Very libertarian. The right-wing libertarians, whatever they believe, are actually deep authoritarians. They're calling for the subordination of private tyrannies. The worst kind of tyrannies. Yep. Like, yeah. I saw that quote like 20 years ago, and it definitely was part of my radicalization process. I've long come to believe that libertarians are, that Noam Chomsky, like the only reason he was able to survive in the system is because he's not explicitly a communist. Right, that he essentially has found new language structures and new ways to describe, like he's criticizing power, and the system within America hadn't devolved so badly that it thought to itself, well, we can't stamp out anybody that's trying to critique the government. We're only going after communists. And so Chomsky positioned himself, and I think that he's smart enough to understand that he positioned himself this way to be able to critique power without being a communist, right? And so his solutions, but ultimately what this means is that his solutions have to be just vote for the lesser of two evils. That's the only solution he's allowed and permitted to put on the table. That we all just have to vote blue harder. We all just have to vote for the lesser of two evils harder. And it's the only position he's permitted to have. Because if he actually suggested real solutions, he would not be permitted to be at MIT. He would not be permitted to be a professor. He would not be permitted to be involved in the academia of American life. That explicitly, on purpose, and states it out loud constantly that if you are a communist, we're going to chase you out of the system. Right, the fact that we have like any amount of communists in any position anywhere in America at all, the fact that somebody like Richard Wolff exists at all, it's kind of a testament to the staying power and the truth of the communist idea and the communist system. Because like McCarthy blacklisting was real, right? So, on the screen right now, I saw the Netanyahu, I listened to the Netanyahu speech that he gave in front of Congress. Probably one of the most pathetic things I've ever listened to in my life. Netanyahu is very obviously a demented, pathetic little man who has been graced with far more authority than somebody like him should ever be given. The bald-faced, naked lies that he spewed out at this, followed by the clapping. There was one point where he said something along the lines of like, they say that we killed those Palestinians, but I'm here to say that we didn't. And it's like, but like, you obviously did. right? It'd be like standing in the middle of the town center, in the middle of Times Square, with a pistol and shooting a guy, and then holding the gun up while it's still smoking, saying, "I didn't shoot that guy," while everybody has filmed it and literally watched you do it. And when he said, it was so funny because the whole experience can be described as like Netanyahu says a sentence, everybody claps. The guy, there was like 50 applause breaks during his like 20-minute speech. Like everybody clapping over and over again. At one point, he addressed the audience and said, "You have to actually let me finish the sentence before you start applauding." And there was this one lie that he said that was so obviously a flagrant lie that when the clapping seals that we call Congress actually clapped to it, it was like so obviously a lie. And there was a point where he says, right, "Give us the tools faster and we'll finish the job faster." And somebody tweeted out, "Literally give us more weapons and we'll accelerate our genocide," followed by a standing ovation. This is the very definition of a society in decline, right? The person of a foreign state who the United States is funding and backing, actively standing in front of those people, calling for genocide, saying out loud in front of everybody, "Give us the tools faster and we'll finish the job faster." This is the very definition of losing credibility. Yeah, literal death worship. Capitalism is a death cult. If you're living in China, India, Russia, anywhere in the Middle East outside of Israel, Africa, Latin America, you're looking at this and you are going, "Oh fuck, these guys are Nazis." And it's like as naked as it can be at this point, right? Like, historically speaking, this moment is going to be on the same kind of level as the speeches that Adolf Hitler gave, right? Adolf Hitler stands up and says, "We're going to commit a genocide against the Jews in front of everybody, for everybody to hear. It's on the public record," right? Well, the only difference is that Adolf Hitler wasn't being backed by a foreign power. That he was at least supported by his own people and being put forward by Germans. Whereas Netanyahu, like, this whole genocide could end if the Congress basically went, nah, we're not going to give you the tools to do the job faster, right? We're just not going to do that. So it's just like a farce. It's like a total parody with deadly, deadly consequences. And, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris, who is now your presidential candidate from the Democrats, or at least she's angling for it. Statement from Vice President Kamala Harris. "Yesterday at Union Station in Washington, D.C., we saw despicable acts by unpatriotic protesters and dangerous hate-fueled rhetoric." No, she's not talking about Netanyahu. "I condemn any individuals associated with the brutal terrorist organization Hamas, which has vowed to annihilate the state of Israel and kill Jews. Pro-Hamas graffiti and rhetoric is abhorrent, and we must not tolerate it in our nation. I condemn the burning of the American flag. That flag is a symbol of our highest ideals as a nation and represents the promise of America," right? Because you got to believe the promises of psychopathic, mass-murdering genociders, right? "It should never be desecrated in that way. I support the right to peacefully protest, but let's be clear, anti-Semitism, hate, and violence of any kind have no place in our nation." Very unserious statement from a very unserious person. I'm super, super looking forward to her getting dunked on by this guy, Donald J. Trump. We're not ready for a Marxist president, and Lion Kamala Harris is a radical left Marxist, and worse. Dude, I wish. Right? I just absolutely wish that Kamala Harris, right? Yeah, woke CIA drone pilot literally says, did you see the Kamala's tweet today about the protesters? I was one step ahead of you, woke. I was one step ahead of you. Donald J. Trump. And worse. Dude. Meanwhile, though, because it's not all sunshine and lollipops, it's time to save ourselves. From the Hill, Pelosi says Netanyahu gave the worst speech to Congress from any foreign leader. Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi blasted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to Congress on Wednesday as the worst in the body's history, harshly criticizing the leader's lack of progress towards a hostage deal with Hamas. Benjamin Netanyahu's presentation in the House chamber today was by far the worst presentation of any foreign dignitary invited and honored with the privilege of addressing the Congress of the United States, Pelosi wrote on the social media platform X after the speech. The former speaker skipped the event in order to attend a listening session with Israeli families of hostages held by Hamas and those killed in the war. Feeling guilty, Pelosi? A little bit of guilt? Feeling bad that you keep giving money to a genocide project? Right? Maybe, crazy thought, maybe you should take some of the money that you got from your insider trading, right? And maybe you should use it to help some Palestinians. You ever think about that, Pelosi? Huh? No? No? Not going to do that? Just going to sit down and listen? Many of us who love Israel spend time today listening to Israeli citizens whose families have suffered in the wake of the October 7th Hamas terror attack and kidnappings, Pelosi continued. Fun fact about that. A lot of the people, a lot of the citizens, a lot of the Israeli citizens that died on October 7th were actually killed by Israeli forces. The Israelis have a policy that they call the Hannibal Doctrine. And the Hannibal Doctrine says that it is better for Israeli forces to kill Israeli citizens than have those Israeli citizens be captured as hostages. That's a real thing. You can look it up. What a catastrophe. Pelosi continued. These families are asking for a ceasefire deal that will bring the hostages home. And we hope the Prime Minister would spend his time achieving that goal. He doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't care about those people. Like I don't know what world these people are living in where they actually think that a guy like Netanyahu is like capable of giving a shit. You know what I mean? He wants the natural gas. He wants the natural gas. He wants like the $20 trillion worth, or the how much money it is, $200 billion worth of natural gas that they found in Gaza. That's what he wants. That's what this is all about. Sort of blows me away that every single article about this doesn't begin with in Netanyahu's pursuit for the natural gas in Gaza, because that's 100% what this is all about. Like, if Gaza had nothing in it, if Gaza was just like, oceanfront property, as psychopaths like Trump's son-in-law, I forget his name offhand, outright said, this is the fucking living doll that is Ivanka Trump's husband. Then this would not be happening, right? Kushner, Jared Kushner, a name I'm trying desperately to forget every single day, and I almost did. Just me, I almost did. The striking statement from a top Democrat underlines the growing divide between Netanyahu and the party. Democrats have been increasingly critical of Netanyahu, despite overwhelming support for Israel, as he has appeared hesitant to back a hostage deal with Hamas supported by President Biden. I love this reporting. Democrats are like, hey, maybe don't dedicate everything to a genocide. You don't need to exterminate every single Palestinian. Hey, well, here's your money. And the news is like, heavily critical of the Netanyahu regime and the policies that he's following. I'm literally like, what? Just because they say, we wish you'd do better, when they hand over billions of dollars of weapons, it doesn't mean shit. What are you talking about? Like, what is this? What is this objective reporting bullshit that you're trying to do here? It's absolutely... Yet, don't forget they want to build an artificial Suez Canal, says Eric. Conton writes, just so you know, if you are in Ohio, you must be on guarded vigilance of bones in boneless chicken wings. Companies are not responsible. It is the consumer. Yeah, dude, like, America is literally saying out loud that we don't have to pay any attention whatsoever to the rights. Like, we don't need to listen to the FDA. We don't need to listen to consumer rights boards or anything like this. The Supreme Court literally passed legislation that's just like oversight schmoversight. Corporations can regulate themselves. Like, and so they will. They will regulate themselves. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to sell you boneless chickens full of bones. If they could sell you a bone with like a little bit of breading on it and have you buy that bone as if it was chicken, they would do it, right? Like, if they could sell you a glass of water that they have dyed white as milk, they would do that. This is what makes the, like, corporations will self-regulate idea so hysterically ridiculous, is that there's no evidence at all that they will ever, under any circumstances, do that. Like, the entire history, like, I think history will look back on America and say, yeah, the defunding of the education system that began in the 70s and the 80s, the systemic assault against public education in America was a deep, 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 deep catastrophe for America. Just a deep catastrophe for America. That America could have had an educated populace that actually understood, like, basic rational things. But instead, we completely defunded the education system. Teachers are now, like, leaving the education system in droves simply because they can't afford the job. They can't afford to do the work anymore. That they've got to go find work elsewhere because the job simply doesn't pay. And this decline in education through America is leading to a population that simply doesn't understand, like, the basics, like the absolute basics. And we've ended up with an extremely gullible population that genuinely believes the idea that corporations will regulate themselves, even though if you look at any history and read literally any book not written by a propagandist, but even that statement, right, the idea that there are propagandists, right? People don't know any, like, Americans and Westerners now no longer have the toolkit to be able to determine the difference between what is real and what is fake. And they don't understand when it is you should actually listen to somebody and take what they say seriously, and when you should be skeptical of that person. And how does someone go from skepticism into belief? How do you get into that? What's the through line? Well, we don't teach anybody that. We don't even begin to teach anybody that. Americans don't even know the basics of their own history any longer. So, the skibbity toilet generation, which incidentally, for those of you who don't know, right, skibbity toilet was like an internet meme that is like the most unhinged, crazy shit I've ever seen. And I don't like to dunk on like the media that the younger generation is consuming, because when I was a kid, I was big into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I'm sure that from my father's perspective, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was like incomprehensible. You know, like, why do kids care about this? What is this even? This generation today. How many times do I need to hear that? This generation today, right? And so I'm pretty uncritical about this whole skibbity toilet phenomenon. But now it's being turned into a movie and a television series funded by Michael Bay, no less. Yeah, and it's just a rehashing of Gmod SFM memes from the 2000s. Like, it's exactly the type of thing that kids would like watch and just be like, like, when I was growing up, there was like Charlie the Unicorn, right? Just this like dumb shit. And like, you take a look at something like SpongeBob, for example, right? Like, SpongeBob isn't exactly hinged, right? Peanut Butter Beatrice says, "Idiocracy is our destiny. Mike Judge will be remembered as a greatest prophet." I always like to point out. Hold on, before I do this, Haletosis over on Twitch said, "You dunking on Skibbity Toilet?" No. I respectfully say that I do not understand why anybody would spend more than 2 minutes watching Skibbity Toilet, but I am a 41-year-old man. I am not a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old. And I understand how 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds get, right? Skibbity Toilet is not for me. It's just not for me. It wasn't made for me. It's not spread around by me, right? It's a whole other person. And that person has bad taste because they are a child. That's fine. Not everything that gets made is for every single person. Hiltosa says, "I'm older than you, and it's fine art." I mean, it's definitely like unhinged, right? Like, we can agree with that. It's definitely like unhinged. It's the kind of thing that somebody would make while on some kind of drug. It makes sense that at the same time that America is going through a fentanyl crisis, that Skibbity Toilet becomes the apex of our culture, right? It's 100% like a fentanyl-fueled, like crazy, like lucid dream. Eric writes, "I never heard of Skippy the Toilet." No, Eric. No. Skibbity. Okay? Who wrote it? Somebody wrote it. Yeah. XD wrote it in the chat. Skibidi. Skibbity Toilet. Dude, no, I can't show it on the stream or else I'll get demonetized. Maybe I can show a picture of it. Yeah, probably. Skibbity Toilet. Skibbity Toilet. Okay? Yeah. You're right, Hiltosis. It's perfect for our time. Divorced of all meaning, it becomes meaningful. I have said this repeatedly on this stream. You can go back in time and you can get in the Wayback Machine and watch me say it, okay? Hold on one second. Milo needs help. Here you go, buddy. Down you go. America is heading... Yes, that looks incredibly dumb. Yep, and it's like one of the most popular franchises in America today. Right? Alexei Gerasimov, the creator behind Skibbity Toilet, is working with leading independent Hollywood entertainment studio Invisible Narratives to expand the YouTube short series into a myriad of product lines and a potential television and movie franchise, similar to the Marvel Universe or Transformers. "I've always been a director that believes in taking risks," filmmaker Michael Bay, who is working on the project with Invisible Narratives. This actually has a population base that rivals Star Wars and Harry Potter. Okay? So, like, Just me's like, it's a Russian Trojan horse. Look, this is, no word of a lie, right? As popular as Harry Potter, as popular as Star Wars, possible psyop, no. Here's my take, okay? Here's my take on skibbity fucking toilets. When cultures discredit themselves, right? When cultures discredit themselves, the culture gravitates towards absurdism for absurdism's sake. In a artistic phenomenon that has been called at one time Dadaism. Okay? Dadaism arose in Eastern Europe in the wake of World War I with the explicit statement that any culture that produces the horrors of World War I is a culture with no credibility. We don't need to take any of its symbols, iconographies, or institutions seriously at all. And all that lays before us should be rendered absurd for absurdism's sake. So the Queen of England, the Pope, any president of any country anywhere, Bismarck, should be torn down from a sacred space, and we should not refer to them in seriousness, ever, and we should only acknowledge their presence insofar as we relentlessly and ruthlessly desacrify them, right? Desacralize them, defile them. That Dadaism is a force that comes into cultures to defile what came before it and render it no longer sacred. And I think that's what Skibbity Toilet is. I think that Skibbity Toilet is a generation of kids coming in to reality and immediately understanding. For the most obvious reasons. Like, immediately understanding. Instantaneously. Oh, this culture has no credibility. We are obviously ruled by psychopathic genocidal maniacs who have no morals and whose principles are essentially psychopathic, who are opportunists, who only believe in wealth and power, who care about nothing. And so anything that they show us is instantaneously discredited. We don't care about it at all. We don't care about any of the cultural institutions. We don't care about Harry Potter, Star Wars, Marvel. We don't care. We don't care about any of it. We are going to... So what are we going to care about? I'll tell you what we're going to care about. Skibbity Toilet. No. Just me. Listen to me, okay? Because Just Me writes, my 6-year-old nephew watches this because he thinks it's silly and then turns to something else. It's not that deep. I think you're right. Like, I think you're right to a degree. But, like, what I'm describing, like Dadaism as a force, I don't think it's I don't think somebody goes... that at some point someone does say this, right? It does get stated, but that the movement itself comes out of humanity, just comes out of us. That you've been listening for a long time. You know exactly what I'm talking about all the time when I'm talking about artistry and living in life and emotions and all of this. Most people, most of the time, are ruled by their emotions. Most people, most of the time, are reactionary. That most people are not moving through the world with awareness and the fullness of their consciousness in an enlightened state, right? That's not how 99.99999% of humanity operates most of the time. Most of us are just existing in reality, trying to get by, trying to do what we're doing, and responding to external stimuli. Or in some cases, internal stimuli, right? That we are largely reactionary. We are largely just reacting, right? And something like this, right? This is where the social critic steps in. Like, this phenomenon is going beyond silly video, right? Like, they're making a movie franchise. They want it to be like a Marvel movie franchise. It's extremely popular. That this and that popularity is not coming about from a conscious place. That popularity is not manifesting. Like, the zeitgeist is not intelligent, right? The zeitgeist is non-intelligent. It is primarily an emotional force. And people who don't want to wade into the murky waters of the zeitgeist are fine to stand outside of it, or to stand beneath it, because that's what it actually is. You can never be outside the zeitgeist. You can only stand beneath it and be a victim of it. Like, you can only experience it. You experience it one way or the other. And simply point at it and say, what a ridiculous thing. This is nonsensical. There's nothing to it. Well, to those of us who wade into the deep, murky waters of the zeitgeist, you can begin to understand a little bit clearer that everything that happens in the zeitgeist happens as a response to something else. That seems to be almost built in and baked in to the human experience. That the son rejects the father, right? That seems to be almost genetic. That whatever the father liked, the son will reject. And simply reject out of hand. It's not conscious, right? There are actually many corporations and many businesses that are deeply, deeply concerned about this existent phenomenon within humanity, which is that the son rejects the father, right? Well, if you're a corporation that wants to last forever and you want to be an eternal force in the world, that's a concern. That's a big, big problem, because you've built your entire idea on selling a product or an idea or a vision or a brand or a lifestyle to a specific type of person. And then along comes the next generation, and built into their very fabric of their being, not even their consciousness, literally the DNA structure, their genetic quantum level, at the quantum level, oh, my dad likes that? Then that's the fucking stupidest thing that exists in the world, and I'm not interested at all. And I think that's where something like Skibbity Toilet comes from. That it's simultaneously a rejection of the culture and an embracing of the absurd. And children will often embrace the absurd, but there will be this idea of embracing the absurd while still listening to the moral messages that exist within that. Like, you think about something like SpongeBob. I think SpongeBob is a great example of this. Because SpongeBob is just absurd, right? It's absolutely nuts. But there is kind of like a message there, and there's something underneath it, right? It's a very capitalist story that gets told. Like, SpongeBob is a worker in a capitalist environment. Mr. Krabs is a money-obsessed capitalist, right? There's all these stories that get told around that very concept of Mr. Krabs wanting more money, and his struggle between money and relationships. I think Mr. Krabs is the most interesting figure in SpongeBob, for sure. Because of that. Because there are so many moments where he needs to, but me money! But me money! And his love of money contradicts his love of his daughter, his workers, his friends. And so he has to make choices, right? And so there's like a message behind that. Well, kids are growing up in an environment today where there is no moral message to be had from this culture, right? There's nothing to learn from this culture, nothing serious. The only lesson that this culture is going to teach anybody is lie, cheat, and steal. And you figure that out when you're 6. Like, you don't need to be a genius to figure out, oh, just betray everybody around me, extract as much wealth as I can, build passive income structures, enslave people, right? And the society rewards you for it, right? So if you reject that, right, and there's nobody else producing anything, well, what remains? What remains? So that is my criticism of Skibbity Toilet. You are welcome. And just me, as a final response, everything is deep. You can go deep down a well, dude, on every little tiny thing. There's no such thing as shallowness. It's all deep water. Just Me writes, doctors are speaking out as Ford gives pharmacists 14 more ailments to treat. The privatization of our healthcare system is in full swing, for sure. Nah, I've been reporting on that for a long time. It's like, it's kind of embarrassing, right? Hiltosa says, the people are toilets and they have guns. The perfect image of today's world. Yeah, dude. Nah, I'm so looking forward. Like, wait until Skibbity Toilet becomes as popular as Minions. Right? Like, instead of Minions, it's going to be Skibbity Toilet. And then there's going to be the people who are making parodies of Skibbity Toilet. And then there's going to be, like, the dark, gritty retelling of Skibbity Toilet. And everything's going to be, like... Dude, that's what we should make, dude. We should make a dark, gritty version of Skibbity Toilet. Call it Skibbity, right? They'll drop the word toilet, and it'll just be Skibbity. Skibbity! You've lost your mind, Skibbity! You've lost the thread! I need you to hand in your badge and your gun! I don't work for you! Skibbity! Right? Do like The Godfather, but it's Skibbity. Wah 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 wah. Oh wah 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 wah. And da 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 da. Turning to more serious news. Tremendous NASA video shows CO2 spewing from US into Earth's atmosphere. Dude. Oh, of course. We're gonna get hit with an ad. A 30-second ad, forget it. Modeling behavior, visualizing carbon dioxide, right? Like, climate change, as the climate change narrative continues forward, right? It's just like hilarious that anybody, it's like living in a floodplain as it's being flooded, and people are walking around pretending like it's not being flooded. You know? Like, I keep seeing people saying that the science is out on the CO2 question. That well, the Earth keeps, like, look at this. Yeah, everything's fine, guys. Everything's totally fine. We're definitely not completely fucking crazy. We're definitely not, like, absolutely losing our fucking minds. Oh my god, dude. It is kind of beautiful, though. For those of you who are just listening in, we are watching a video of the carbon emissions that exist across the globe. And it's going day by day, so there's just, like, pulsing that happens, right? The lights come on, the lights go off. The lights come on, the lights go off. And, of course, there are two huge hotspots. And those two huge hotspots, America, which isn't pulsing. It's just one big burning fire constantly. And then China, which is the same. Eric writes, I had a fascist libertarian trying to argue to me that free healthcare causes long wait times, and then completely denied when I pointed out how the British Conservative deregulated and defunding the UK healthcare system. He then just said this has nothing to do with the free market, but just fiscal policy. Yet these people are just fraud. Correct. That's why debating them is no longer a thing that we should do. Right? Because all they're doing is lying. Right? Like, they don't care about the truth. They're not interested in seeking the truth. They're not attempting to find out what the truth is. That the only reason they're talking to you is to obfuscate on purpose. That what they want you to do is spend all of your time debunking them. Well, and in the time that you take to debunk them, they just spew out 10 more lies. Like, this is a tried and true strategy. It's what the tobacco companies do. It's what the it's what the climate change conversation is, right? It's just about being as fraudulent as possible, lying as often as possible. And the big difference is that, unlike the tobacco industry case, where it's single individuals that are really paying the cost, in the climate change conversation, it's going to be all of us, right? Just Me writes, gotta go watch my pooch. Have a great evening, everyone. Like, share, and subscribe. Yeah, be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to share. Be sure to subscribe. Thanks for being here, guys. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I need you guys to know that you guys being here is really what makes the show worth doing. Really what makes it worth hitting record. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. Like, share, subscribe. Donate to the Patreon. Do all the things. Hit the bells. Hit the whistles. Tell people I exist. Tell people I exist. In the climate change conversation, Canada is proposing to lead on climate, but it's doubling down on oil. Deeply serious people. We are a deeply serious people of a deeply serious society who actually deeply care about serious things. Despite climate-friendly plans, the government's controversial decision to take over the Trans Mountain Pipeline made it one of the biggest promoters of fossil fuel projects. Oh, it's almost like they're liars. Like all major rivers winding through the country, Canada's most controversial oil pipeline is destined for the ocean. The Trans Mountain Pipeline crosses 2 provinces, threads a national park in the Rocky Mountains, dips underneath bodies of water, and passes through dozens of First Nations communities before terminating at a sprawling oil storage facility on the verdant shores of the Pacific. After a decade of fierce protests, cost overruns, and construction delays, oil started flowing at the beginning of May. But there was no grand ceremony or ribbon cutting. Instead, a China-bound Aframax tanker named Dubai Angel departed with 550,000 barrels of diluted bitumen to be sold to global markets. In the coming years, the mega project will move nearly 900,000 barrels every day. The number of tankers will surge sevenfold. When Justin Trudeau was elected in 2015, he touted his government's climate credentials on the world stage. Canada is back, my friends, he told delegates at the Paris Climate Summit. We're here to help. His government rolled out a nationwide carbon tax, or as the then Environment Minister Catherine McKenna called it, a price on pollution. But in the years since, Canada remains the only G7 nation to emit greenhouse gases far above its 1990 levels, while now also planning to extract and export record volumes of oil. The pipeline itself has become emblematic of a Canadian contradiction. Promises of strong climate action, coupled with billions in fossil fuel investments and, critics say, massive government subsidies to the oil industry at a moment when the planet needs to move away from fossil fuels. The project was first proposed in 2012 by Kinder Morgan, a Texas company that hoped to triple the existing capacity of a pipeline it bought in 2005 that was built more than 70 years ago. For years, too much oil passing through too few pipelines has meant Canadian oil sells at a discount on the global markets. The oil and gas industry said Trans Mountain would, for the first time, give Canada access to markets overseas, particularly China, and close the price gap. In 2019, the project won regulatory approval. Trudeau, flanked by 8 Canadian flags and 5 cabinet ministers, claimed it marked a significant investment in Canada's future that will create thousands of good middle-class jobs, maintain the highest environmental standards, and fund the clean energy solutions that Canada needs to stay competitive on the global stage. The rosy outlook soon faded amid pushback from critics. I think a lot of us who knocked on doors for the Trudeau government really believed them when they said they were going to bring evidence-based analysis and science and democratic process back to pipeline reviews. Zipporah Berman told the Canadian press in 2018, adding that government had made a very big mistake. After a legal challenge by the province of British Columbia and protests by Indigenous and environmental groups, Kinder Morgan, fearing a messy fight, threatened to abandon the expansion. In response, the federal government took the rare step of buying the pipeline. It must be built. It will be built, Canada's finance minister declared, identifying the project as a vital interest for the country. Green Party leader Elizabeth May said at the time that Kinder Morgan was laughing its way to the bank after the sale. Historically, I'm quite certain this will go down as an epic financial, economic boondoggle that future students of political science will say, why on earth did they do that? That made no sense. No, I think future students of political science will say, I see that the investment that the fossil fuel industry made in the government in the country of Canada paid out. Because future students of political sciences will be Marxists and will be smarter than you, Elizabeth May. Trudeau told voters before the 2019 election that Kinder Morgan wanted to throw up their hands and walk away from the project. It wasn't in my platform that I was going to buy a pipeline for Canadians, but it was in my platform that I was going to grow the economy and protect the environment at the same time, and to do it in thoughtful and responsible ways, he said. Canadians want both, and we can have both. The then Natural Resources Minister Jim Carr said of the country's desire to balance economic growth and fight climate change. In the years since, however, the costs for the project ballooned. What? Projects ballooning their costs under capitalism? How unexpected. A global pandemic, construction delays, permitting issues, and inflation have all pushed the bill far above initial estimates. Don't forget, capitalists' desire to extract more wealth from us. The pipeline is now expected to cost more than $25 billion, over budget, all of it in an attempt to get more Canadian oil burned, not less. Now that the pipeline is fully operational, fully operational, it's just like, it's a fully operational Death Star. A TD Bank economist estimated that Canada could, this year, hit an all-time high in oil production of 5.2 million to 5.4 million barrels a day, up from 4.9 million. Critics ask how pumping more oil is consistent with Canada's promise to reduce emissions and avert a looming global catastrophe. Its goal to cut emissions by at least 40% below 2005 levels by 2030 is not on pace, as confirmed by a recent report from the government's own Environment Commissioner. Despite some progress, the report noted, we are still extremely concerned about the federal government's ability to achieve meaningful progress under the new Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act, adding, the stakes for failing to mitigate climate change grow ever higher, and the window of opportunity to reduce emissions and meet the 2030 and 2050 targets is rapidly closing. Trans Mountain is not the only culprit. Canada still pays billions in subsidies to the oil industry, and Trudeau's government has approved a number of controversial oil and gas mega projects. In 2016, it approved the $36 billion Pacific Northwest LNG project in northern British Columbia, though the project was killed a year later by the Malaysian energy giant Petronas. 2 years later, the government contributed $275 million for another LNG project in British Columbia, a vast export terminal heralded by Trudeau as the single largest private sector investment project in Canadian history. Joe Rogan being like, Trudeau's a communist. The single largest private sector investment project in Canadian history. And in 2022, his government approved Bay du Nord, which, though currently delayed, would extract up to 73 million barrels of oil every year off the coast of Newfoundland. The apparent hypocrisy is rationalized by the fact that global emission pacts, such as the Paris Climate Agreement, are structured in a way that Canada is not directly punished for increasing oil and gas production. Under the agreement, countries are only responsible for their own territorial emissions, says Catherine Harrison, a professor of political science at the University of British Columbia. When it gets burned at destination, it's not the exporter's problem. The phenomenon, she says, is known as the green paradox. What it means is that among the big oil exporters, there's an incentive to get as much oil and gas to markets while they still can, even the ones that have signed on to the agreement to lower emissions. The government claims its action on the climate crisis, particularly its flagship carbon tax policy, are without precedent. But the Prime Minister has also learned that meaningful action on the climate crisis is nearly impossible without buy-in from powerful provinces, including those captive to the fossil fuel industry. Most of Canada's oil exports are from Alberta, and while marketed as ethical oil, supposedly oil produced from countries with stronger labor and environmental laws, the sprawling oil sands operations are among the planet's most emission-intensive, dirtiest, and expensive ways of producing oil. In order to get the province on board with his nationwide climate plan, Trudeau made what Harrison calls the ugly deal of approving the Trans Mountain Pipeline in exchange for Alberta putting a price on carbon emissions. Despite the $1 million purchase, however, Alberta has remained the country's chief climate policy antagonist, fighting any attempt the government has made to rein in the oil and gas industry. In December, the federal government finally announced its plans to cap emissions for the oil and gas sector, a long-delayed policy that climate groups say is critical if Canada is to reach its climate targets. The cap, which goes into effect in 2026, would limit industry emissions by 2030 to 106 to 112 megatons a year, down from 171 megatons in 2019. The legal upper bound would let emissions hit 131 megatons. Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, immediately swore to fight it. There's no question that if the federal government continues on this path, it will end up in court, and I think we will win, she said. Moreover, despite the ambitious intentions behind the cap, Jeff Colgan, director of the Climate Solutions Lab at Brown University, is skeptical the plan will do enough to bring down emissions. There's just so many exceptions and caveats and alternative compliance mechanisms for meeting those targets, said Colgan, adding the plan was vague and mostly silent on penalties for exceeding the upper bounds of the cap. In a recent report, he argues the framework, the result of consultation with the industry, policy experts, and environmental groups, is needlessly complex and creates loopholes for industry to avoid making real reductions to greenhouse gas emissions. In that context, the Trans Mountain Pipeline's immense cost overruns feed into broader questions about the future of Canada's oil industry. Economists have already predicted that the Trans Mountain Pipeline will soon be clogged with producers rushing to get their product to market. With no new mega projects on the horizon, the growth trajectory of Canada's oil output will slow by early 2026 as the appeal of Canadian oil, which has long traded at a discount on the global markets, fades. A year ago, we heard the federal environment minister telling the fossil fuel industry, "Don't worry about this proposed oil and gas emissions cap because we still expect production to grow by 1 million barrels per day by 2030, said Harrison. They're not saying that anymore. They're now talking about an expectation of production decline, not due to the oil and gas emissions cap, but due to global climate action. It felt like a refreshing moment of honesty. Indeed, just a month after opening, the Canadian government is trying to walk away from the Trans Mountain Pipeline. The finance minister said there was no interest in being a long-term owner of the project, and the government has now floated the idea of selling the pipeline to a consortium of First Nations. That does not sit well with some of the members of the I'm definitely mispronouncing this. Tsleil-Waututh Nation, a community directly across from the tanker farm that has emerged as some of the pipeline's fiercest critics. They say it's a reconciliation deal to sell First Nations people the pipeline so that we can share in the revenues, says Reuben George of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. But it's a debt-ridden, stranded asset. It would be economic smallpox to Indigenous people. The nation's analysis also concluded the environmental risks of an increase in tanker traffic or an oil spill were too high and would have absolutely cataclysmic consequences for marine life. We've spent decades trying to be stewards of this land and these waters, George said. My son told me the other day, we won't be the generation that stops trying to fight for this place. For Colgan of the Climate Solutions Lab, the government's decision to invest billions in a piece of infrastructure in an industry that is among the least globally competitive because of its high extraction costs makes as little sense today as it did then. At the end of the day, there is a direct tension between building the infrastructure, like a pipeline, to satisfy the profit incentives the Canadian oil and gas industry wants, and meeting Canada's international commitments on climate change, Colgan said. It seems very unlikely Canada can continue to increase its oil and gas output and also make its Paris commitments. I just don't think those two are compatible. CH writes, good to see you, CH. Canadian federal government is climate evil. Yeah, Canada is not a thing. A landlocked country of Alberta would have no outlet for this crap. I buy nothing from Alberta. Cotton writes, man, what is the point? At this point, why try to play it off like you're trying when you know you ain't and you know you won't be stopped? Because liberals, the whole strategy of liberals is to pretend like you care. That's what, right? But that's why we're voting in conservatives soon, right? Because people just like no longer are buying it. They don't believe the Trudeau liberals any longer. So they're going to oust them and put in somebody who's literally going to stand in front of them and be like, climate change is a hoax. Drill, baby, drill. My favorite part, my absolute favorite part about how foolish we are. Forget about the climate change devastation, okay? Because I think that at this stage in the game, you've made your mind up about it, right? You either care about the human species or you don't care about the human species, right? And that's fine. That is what it is. But the oil and gas sector, like, one of the things that I always bring up to climate change denialists, I shouldn't put that in quotations, to climate change denialists and people who pretend like, oh, Canada's such a small country and we don't really do blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Okay, well, we run out of oil, right? This is what we should actually be talking about. I think that climate change people should stop talking about climate change to people who are skeptical. I think at this stage in the game, if you're skeptical, you're just delusional, right? And you can't be convinced, and you won't be convinced, right? Just like you won't be convinced that, like, if you're an 80-year-old man, you're not going to be convinced that Jesus Christ isn't coming back at some point. Like, that's just what's happening. That's the reality that you live in, right? So there's no point. There's just no point in having the conversation. There's no point going into it. That if that 80-year-old man comes to you and says, I really want to talk to you about Jesus, you should be like, okay. Because, you know, they're going to try to come to you at a good place. But there is a hard reality that sidesteps the entire conversation of climate change, the importance of us getting off fossil fuels, the importance of us creating new energy systems, the importance of moving forward with a plan and an idea of what we should do, which is the oil runs out, right? Sven over on Twitch says hello. Good to see you, Sven. The oil runs out, right? Like, it's a non-renewable resource, right? Like, forget about trying to pitch the idea that, like, when you burn carbon, when you burn oil and gas, it sends carbon into the atmosphere. That carbon captures UV radiation that would otherwise be released back into the Earth, back into the solar system, I should say. And it gets captured in the Earth, increasing Earth's temperature over time. And that this shift is going to have cataclysmic effects on our environment. Those concepts are too difficult for these people to grasp, and they don't want to. So we've got to start asking those people, what are we going to do when the oil runs out? What's the plan for what we do when the oil runs out? Because China has a plan. This is what makes this whole conversation so funny to me. Like, I just find myself giggling about it. That we are bending over backwards to pull all of this oil and all of this coal and all of this natural gas and all of these fossil fuels, non-renewable resources, out of the ground as fast as we possibly can, with as little regard as we possibly can for the future of the species, And we're sending all of that oil and gas and coal. Where are we sending it? China. What are they doing with it? They're building solar. They're the front runners in the solar industry, and it's not even close. They're building so much solar so quickly that The Economist is going, they're building so much that that nobody can make any money off of it. And that's what matters. It's fake dollar bills that we printed. Meanwhile, China is just saying, more solar panels, more solar, more. Where else can we put it? Can we make the streets out of solar? Can we put solar panels all over our infrastructure? Can we put it on rooftops? Can we put it on trains? Can we put it on cars? Where else can we put solar panels? Where? Mountaintops? Where can we put solar farms? We put solar farms all over the place. How can we do this? Faster. And so when we run out of oil, which is an inevitability, we run out of oil, it happens. What do? What's our plan? And the answer is, we don't have a plan. We don't have a plan at all. No. Sven writes, Orton writes, yo, what are we talking about? We're talking about the inevitable decline of fossil fuels because we run out of it. Sven writes, nuclear energy. Yeah, but come on, we're capitalists, right? We'll slap together a nuclear power plant in the shittiest possible way, and it'll malfunction in 5 years. And then that'll irradiate some ecosystem. Like, we're not responsible. Maybe we were like 50 years ago, 60 years ago, but we don't give a shit about any of that anymore. Right? Like, what we're going to do is we're going to bribe, let's use Texas as an example, right? So some billionaire, just some psycho, right, will think, we need more energy in Texas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bribe the governor of Texas, and he'll give me a contract to build a nuclear power plant, in a watershed somewhere, because it's always got to be in the most critical piece of ecological infrastructure, right? It can't just be off somewhere. It's got to make sure that when things go wrong, it does the most damage. But of course, the capitalist just wants as much money as he can get for himself. So he doesn't give a shit if the thing works. He doesn't care if it actually lasts for any amount of time. He wants to siphon as much wealth as he possibly can. And so the project, first of all, a project, like if China was building it, it would be done in 5 days. But if a capitalist is building it, it's going to take 20 years. So, they build it next to a reserve. Yeah, exactly. And why does it take them forever to build anything? Because then they can siphon more wealth away. So, like, if the plan is, we'll build other infrastructure. No, we won't. When have we ever built anything? Like, what was the last project that we actually built of note and of value and of worth here in the West? Like, an aircraft carrier, I guess. Right? If you want an aircraft carrier that looks like the fucking Death Star or a Star Destroyer or something, we got you covered. Right? But we don't build shit. Like, we stopped building shit like 70 years ago. Like, we used to build like the Empire State Building. We used to build the Hoover Dam. We used to build this stuff. Right? But we don't do that shit anymore. Moreover, we're educating nobody. Right? We're educating literally nobody to do anything. So, who's actually going to build this shit? And then who's going to actually run this shit? Who's actually going to do any of this? And the reality is that none of it's going to happen because the people who are at the very top of the chain don't give a fuck if it gets built. And why don't they give a fuck if it gets built? Because they don't care if you don't have any power. They don't care. They care about fake dollar bills that they print. That's what they care about. They're playing this weird little kooky game of capitalism. And then every so often, what they'll do is they'll poop out. So there'll be like a nuclear reactor that produces enough energy to power a small town, right? Which will be built like on their watershed, directly at like a crisis point. And there'll be big news articles about how successful we were, new technology. Oh my God, the Wall Street Journal will do a big expose about how great we are and how big Elon Musk's cock is and all that. And we'll all be like, wow, yeah, we're building nuclear. Look at us go. And then the thing will have like a critical failure and irradiate the watershed, and all of those people will be poisoned. It'll be a complete and total fucking disaster. And then the capitalists will get the insurance money and walk away. Right? Like, that's how America actually works. Like, that's how this thing actually goes. And meanwhile, China is just shitting out solar panels. Like, they just can't stop shitting out solar panels. They're just another solar panel, another solar panel, another solar panel. Like, literally every second is just another solar panel. They've got, like, factories that are just, like, shitting these things out. Just... like... Larry 1993 says, that flag behind you is wild. Which one, bud? Which one? I got 3. People yell at me for all of these flags. Like, I got yelled at the other day. Somebody came in just to yell at me for the Canadian flag. Literally was like, you're no communist. That settler colonial flag, which is true, it is a settler colonial flag, right? You can't be a communist and support that flag. And I'm like, I need to indicate that I'm from Canada, right? I feel like it's good branding, right? I am the Canadian communist, right? Canadian communist, right? So, Larry continues, what love the Canadian flag? There are 51 state. I think you mean they are our 51st state. Yeah. Yes, Canada is a vassal of the United States. That's certainly true. But so it's not the Canadian flag you have a problem with. Is it the Palestinian flag? Is the Palestinian flag that you're struggling with? Is it the communist flag? Oh, the Palestinian flag. Oh, okay. What's the issue with the Palestinian flag? Let's start, Larry. You seem like a fine, upstanding gentleman, right? You seem like a gentleman that is honest. Oh, Barry. Oh, I see it now. You've done an I and a 3. Barry. My mistake, Barry. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. So, what is your opinion, Barry, of this flag? Why is this flag difficult for you? Because I can tell you what my position is about what you might call the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Isaac writes, Ursula von der Leyen said, China is building too fast, too much, and cheap. Yeah, because cheap is the problem, right? Like, capitalists want fake money dollars that they are responsible for printing in the first place, right? They're not logical, right? They're following a religious ideology. And they're genuinely looking at what China is doing with solar panels and scratching their head and saying, but how will they make any money? Like, literally, you can read economist articles about this, where they're like, but if you do that, then everyone will have free energy forever. How do you extract wealth from them? That's straight up their argument. Like, China will not be successful with this because no one will make money exploiting the people. Meanwhile, China is just like, Another solar panel, another solar panel, another solar panel. Yeah, we don't give a fuck about the fake money dollars. Like, I'm sure there's some Chinese person being like, man, it'd be so great to take over the energy system and exploit people for their need for energy and extract value from people. I'm sure there's some Chinese person somewhere who thinks that way. I'm sure there's a Chinese billionaire somewhere, right? Fortunately for us and for the Chinese, the Chinese Communist Party is in charge of China. The National People's Congress is how China is actually governed. And they literally expel capitalists on purpose. Barry says, of Palestine, of the Palestinian flag, right? Just not fond of it. Everyone that flies that flag over here in my wonderful country, all they do is destroy shit. Well, there is a genocide on, right, Barry? Right? Like, America is funding a genocide of the Palestinian people. And that's a genocide that has been ongoing for a long time. That the Israelis have been committing a genocide against the Palestinian people from at least the 40s. At least the 40s. That the first prime minister of Israel, Ben, I'm going to mispronounce this, Ben Gvir, said explicitly that the policy of Israel, the purpose of the Israeli settlers, was to ethnically cleanse the region of Palestinians and steal their land. USA Great Satin first comment says the Palestinians destroy shit. I think that what Barry is saying is that the people in his area, right, what Barry is seeing, right, if I want to be fair to Barry, what Barry is experiencing and what Barry is seeing is that the people who are flying this flag, the Palestinian flag, are the ones causing trouble, so to speak. It's the classic, like, they should protest peacefully kind of angle. And but the stakes are pretty high, right? The stakes are pretty high. Like, the genocide of the Palestinian people has been going on for a long, long time. I think there's a lot of anger because there's been so many falsehoods told about it. You just need to see Netanyahu's speech to Congress to realize how depraved these people are and how willing they are to tell the most overwhelming and flagrant lies you could possibly hear. That the people who are defending themselves in this process are the Palestinians, right? It's the Palestinians' territory, and the Israelis are ethnically cleansing them. DM writes, good evening, John. Do you see China eventually taking over North and South Korea within the next 100 years in the same way they'll be taking over Taiwan using smart diplomacy methods without bullets fired? The relationship between Korea... China is not going to get involved in Korean politics until the Koreans resolve their own internal politics. And I think that's really as simple as eventually the demographics are going to shift so heavily in the favor of North Korea that North Korea is basically just going to be able to walk into South Korea and just basically be like, we own this place now. And South Korea is going to be like, okay. And they're not going to have the ability to fight back. Like, they will, obviously. And, like, the United States will do what it does, right? But, like, South Korea has the highest suicide rate. I don't know if it's the highest suicide rate in the world, but it's, like, the highest suicide rate in, like, the developed countries. Or in the... what is that stat exactly? Hold on. Let me get this one right. South Korea suicide rate. Compared to other OECD countries, South Korea records the world's fourth highest suicide rate and the highest suicide rate in the OECD. The elderly are at the highest rate, but teen suicide deaths have been rising since 2010. I wonder if we will see... And incidentally, it's like... insane. Like, Literally, you've got like a pretty steady increase. Like each country is like a little bit more than the next one behind it, like little tiny bits increases. And then just a big spike on Lithuania, and then a huge spike on South Korea. That if it wasn't for Lithuania, this spike between Slovenia and South Korea would be absolutely flippin' massive. It's literally it's going from 15 to 25 basically. So it's just like, although this graph is not showing me 25 what, like 25 deaths per what. Oh, I see. It's the most recent available data, suicide rates per 100,000 persons. So it's just like this. So the suicide rates are going up. The birth rates are absolutely what I would be concerned about if I was running South Korea. The birth rate of South Korea is 0.3. That means that for every 100 people in Korea today, in South Korea today, next generation will be 30. And if that birth rate persists, the generation after that, what's 30% of 30? Right? 6? So this is a demographic collapse. Meanwhile, North Korea's demographics are 1.3, their birth rate, right? Which is still bad. It's not the greatest, but that's kind of in line with Canada. And if I was running North Korea, I'd be looking at these demographics and I'd be looking at these numbers and just be like, wait 50 years. Just wait 50 years and we'll be able to walk in. And so I think that China will continue doing business with North Korea because North Korea is in line with what's going on in terms of anti-imperialism, right? Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un, rather, and Putin just had a meeting, right? They drove around in cars and stuff. It was actually very adorable. And I just think that eventually South Korea will fall and North Korea will take over South Korea. And then the relationship between Korea and China will become kind of like the relationship between America and Canada, where Korea will essentially be a vassal of China, but will be permitted to maintain its independence. I don't think that China will ever seek to integrate it in a serious way, because I think that it doesn't need to. I think that China will get everything it wants from Korea, and Korea will happily go along with what China has to say or what it has to do, right? That the only time that China will begin talking a game that is different to that is if American imperialism gets involved in the area. That's it. South Korea has actually declared a national emergency for their low birth rate. Yeah. They've done all kinds of neoliberal policies, but all of them failed. Yeah, exactly. Well, because everything boils down to how do we make sure that productivity, how do we keep people working 60-hour work weeks while raising children? And the answer is you can't. Right? Like, how do I burn fossil fuels while reducing emissions? And the answer is you can't. Barry says, and I would like to read this comment because I think this is kind of indicative. I think this is a good thing to confront. Barry says, I could care less what's going over there. First and foremost, I'm an American. I'd like to put America first. Fix our problems first. Fuck the rest of the world. So I think that's... I don't want to use the word isolationism, but that's kind of what that is, right? It's basically saying we should focus on ourselves, which I think that's a fine thing to do. But here's the hard problem, Barry. Okay? I don't mind this idea, right? I'm not offended by that idea of America, let's fix America's problems. Okay. Well, America is funding Israel, right? America gives huge... how much money does America give Israel every year? I'm not the only one looking it up. So, America gives Israel $3.8 billion a year. How much money did America give in military aid to Israel last year? Last year, as of last year, the U.S. has given $158 billion. According to the Congressional Research Service, $158 billion. Right? Yeah, XD is kind of hitting it in my chat here. You cannot be isolationist while continuing to literally fuck with other countries. That if your idea is, I don't care what goes on in countries all the way around the world. What goes on there, that's their problem. I want to focus on what we're doing here at home and help my country. Because I see we have problems and we should fix those problems. Okay, well then the first thing that you should be fighting for, the first thing that you should be fighting for is you should be fighting against funding a genocide. That's the first thing that you should be fighting for. And that's exactly what the people around you who are flying this flag, the Palestinian flag, that's exactly what they're fighting for. And the reason why they seem extreme, and the reason why they seem to be acting in a manner that you are seeing as frantic or even hysterical, is because that's what it's taking. That's what it's taking in order to get powerful people to even acknowledge them, let alone even think about defunding that genocide. Barry continues. Okay, let's put it this way. America needs to stop sending money to everyone. We need to fix our problems. Right. That's what the people who are flying the Palestinian flag are trying to do. That they would agree with that statement. That they would agree with you. And they would say, I agree. America has its own problems. I agree. America is facing a fentanyl crisis. America is facing a homelessness crisis. America is facing a climate change crisis. America is facing crisis after crisis, an inflation crisis. America is facing a banking crisis. It is facing a devaluation of its dollar crisis. It's facing enormous amounts of crises in the world today that the leadership of America is doing absolutely nothing to deal with at all, while the people in power are sending billions of dollars overseas in order to enact genocides on behalf of a capitalist class. That's what's actually happening, and the people who are flying the Palestinian flag, who are causing problems in your neighborhood, are attempting to do exactly what it is you just said. Stop sending money to genocides. Use that money to fix problems in America. And the reason why they seem to be so dramatic and causing so many problems is because that's what it's taking. That's what it's going to take. The political class in your country, the capitalist class in your country, will not stop doing these genocides until they are directly confronted by people who will make them stop. And that's what they're doing. Like, you're not going to vote your way out of this issue. Larry continues. So they come and destroy our shit. Yep, that's how it's going to go. We, as in the United States, make our wealth off selling military equipment It's been like this since World War II. That's why America is a military powerhouse. I mean, arms dealing, yeah, is part of it. But I wouldn't say that that's the core of American wealth. The core of American wealth since World War II has been the primacy of the dollar. It has been the quote-unquote international system, the rules-based order. Because America post-World War II had military supremacy and productive supremacy, right? They were one of the few countries that survived World War II without any destruction whatsoever. They remained fairly untouched comparatively. I mean, Russia, for example, lost entire cities. The European continent was completely destroyed. So America, post-World War II, essentially steps into the world and says, you guys are all going to trade on the dollar, even if you trade with each other. And we're going to take a piece of it when you trade on the dollar. And we say when, because if you don't, we're going to invade you. And we're going to destroy you. And we're going to cause you a lot of problems. And that's exactly what America does in the world. And there's overwhelming amounts of evidence for this. And so the deal that America has been operating on is that we're going to print money, right? It's a fiat currency. We're going to print money, which we can print infinite money. That's why the dollar has been devaluing year over year since the fiat currency was introduced. And we're going to hand that money to a country, and we're going to say, hey, country, give us goods or services, and we'll give you dollars. So America basically gets goods and services sent to it for nothing. Right? That America doesn't need to do anything, doesn't need to produce anything, doesn't need to actually trade assets or goods in a meaningful way. It just needs to print dollars or put money on a digital screen at this point and hand it to a country, and that country will give them coffee, fruit, bananas, oil, right? Oil. And so America, since World War II, has been getting something of a free ride. And it's not a completely free ride, of course, because every so often America needs to invade a country and destroy its people. Like it did to Libya, for example. Like it did to Iraq or Afghanistan. Like it's done in the Middle East for the last 30 years. More, really, if you take a look at the history. It needs to go into countries that are willing to stand up and be defiant against this rules-based order, this new world order, and destroy that country and overthrow its population and overthrow its government and install dictators and things like this, like they did in Chile, for example, under Pinochet. So and what's frightening for America and for the world in many ways is that this system, this rules-based order, we print dollars and give you dollars and you give us stuff, is coming to an end. That we are currently within an epoch of sorts where America is going to step into the world and it's not going to be able to trade dollars for goods any longer. And the reason for it is because of the rise of China. China has risen on the world stage and has become a credible trading partner and a productive powerhouse of its own right. And it is the center of a trade organization called BRICS, which is a trade alliance between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Hence the name BRICS. This trade organization allows Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa to trade with one another off the dollar. They don't trade dollars. America doesn't get to skim anything off of it. They don't get any free assets. They don't get anything when these countries trade with one another. And America can't really do anything about it. Because China, India, Russia, South Africa, and Brazil are too powerful to invade. That America will happily go and bully an unarmed, defenseless nation without a navy, without an air force, and without a standing army. They will happily go do that, as they've shown over and over again. But when it comes time to actually confront a standing military force, America can't do that. Because America are cowards on the world stage. They have no principles. This trade alliance, BRICS, which again, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, it's in the name, has attracted a lot of attention in the world. The entire rest of the world is looking at that trade organization going, I think that we can get a better deal from BRICS than we can from America. Where this conflict between these two forces has manifested itself most obviously is in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Democratic Republic of the Congo has the largest deposits of cobalt in the world. Cobalt is necessary to build and manufacture electronics. Every single time you interact with a touch screen, there is an 80% chance that the cobalt that is in that touch screen comes from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. China owns 80% of the cobalt mines in the DRC. How did they do that? How did they convince the DRC to give China access to the cobalt? The Chinese made a better deal with the DRC than the Americans. Because here's how the Americans do business in the world. Hey, DRC, give us your cobalt. Take dollars. If you say no, we'll invade you and overthrow your leadership and install somebody who says yes. And that's considered diplomacy. China goes to the DRC and says, hey, we've got a deal. We're going to give you a loan, right? That'll help you build infrastructure to give us access to your cobalt, and then you'll get a percentage of the cobalt. And the DRC says, we don't like this deal. And the Chinese go, oh, well, what about this deal? Oh, you don't like that deal? What about this deal? Oh, you don't like this deal? What about this deal? Until finally they reach a deal. And should the loan begin to interfere with the business between China or the DRC, China will forgive the loans, which they've done in the past. Literally this year, the DRC prevented a CIA-backed coup from taking over the DRC. Aha! Barry intersects with a comment that's worth talking about. Barry says, China could be cut off just by trade. They don't have a navy that can protect their trading lanes. If cut off, only people they can trade with is their neighbors. China lends money. If you can't pay it back, they take a port or a mine. So a couple of things to talk about there, Barry, which is, first of all, let's just deal with the claim China lends money. If you can't pay it back, they take a port or a mine. There's no evidence of this. There's a great Atlantic article, The Myth of the Chinese Debt Trap. The Chinese debt trap is a myth, from the Atlantic. This idea that China takes ports or steals ports or a mine or something like that if loans can't be paid is false. Just nakedly in a 1 + 1 = 2 sort of way. If you care about evidence, you got to drop that claim, because there's no evidence to show that China does this. And there's plenty of evidence to show that China forgives loans. China is the number one country that forgives loans in the world, because China understands that the point of developing your nation is not finance. It's not getting money. Money isn't the goal. They don't worship money. That the goal is building assets. So to deal with the bulk of what you just said, right? I'll move on to Chinese-Indian relationships soon, but because you're touching on a lot of really great stuff, Barry, and I really like talking about this issue. So China could be cut off by trade. They don't really have a navy. So first of all, that's kind of false. They do have a navy, of course, but what you're saying is actually the American strategy, right? There is a paper that came out of the Rand Corporation, that's the Pentagon, entitled Thinking Through the Unthinkable, War with China. You can search it on Google. It's easy to find. Here, we'll do it right now just to show you how easy it is. Thinking Through the Unthinkable, War with China. Here it is. The Rand Corporation, War with China, Thinking Through the Unthinkable. You can literally just read it, right? And it essentially says what you just said, which is that the strategy isn't to get into the mainland of China because there's the nuclear deterrent. The strategy is, and this is the Pentagon, the strategy is to destroy their naval trade, right? To destroy the naval trade that exists in the East and the South China Seas and the Philippine Sea, and to make sure that China can't get boats into Africa. So the response to that from China has been to build what they call the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative, or the Silk Road Project, is high-speed rail that's possible to go even 600 kilometers an hour. Rail so fast, we don't have it here in Canada and the United States. We don't have a single kilometer of this built. China has built 200,000 kilometers of it in a decade. This is a rail that originates in China, as you see here on the map, right? And it goes up into Russia, right? Into Moscow, into Minsk, that's in Belarus, then into Warsaw, finally into Berlin, and then down into Madrid. They've been trying to build other... This is an older map. This map came out in 2018. Yeah, 2018. So I need to update this map. So the pink rails that you see here are projects or ideas. They're currently building them. They're incompleted. This rail system is terrifying the United States. Because the United States understands that it cannot afford to become isolated in the world. And but it also understands that China is emanating a lot of power, what they would call soft power, right? And so the Belt and Road Initiative allows China to maintain trade even amidst a naval conflict. That's the purpose. And that sure, they would lose contact with South America, but they would maintain trade relations with Europe, which is the larger trading partner. Yeah, the new Silk Road. That's a way of thinking about it. And China is, of course, doing everything it can to try to get the Silk Road into Africa. You can see they've started to do this, right? They've started to do it by building ports, and they're starting to get rail systems into Africa, right, into the DRC. Very important to get it into the DRC. Right now, what they're doing is they're getting it from the DRC. So they've got rail going from the DRC into Kenya, into Somalia. Is it Somalia? I don't want to tell tales out of school. Yeah, into Kenya, into Tanzania, and with the goal being to disconnect, or rather to connect this rail up through Egypt into the Middle East to get it connected into Tehran. The thing, watch this, bud, it's about to come full circle. This is so fun. I love this. The thing that is preventing them from doing this easily is Israel. You know that country we were just talking about that the United States gave $158 billion to? They give $3 billion a year to Israel, and then they just give them huge amounts of military aid. You know that genocide that they're doing in Gaza? You know, all of that kind of stuff? The thing that is preventing China from getting a rail system from Tehran into Baghdad, into Jordan, into Zarqa, and then into Cairo is Israel. Because Israel is positioned, this is the border of Israel. It is a border that splits the Middle East from Africa. See how that works? So China cannot get the rail through a land route into Africa. So what are they doing about it? This is great. I love talking about this, dude. Enter the evil Machiavellian geniuses, always on the right side of power, Saudi Arabia. Larry, you're like right in step with me, dude. Right as I'm getting into the next phase, you're saying it. You can't build a rail over water. They did it in Disney World. So, Saudi Arabia understands that the rising power in the world stage is China, and so it is giving China a deal. You see this coast right here, right? The Red Sea. We're going to build a city. We're building a city right in this area. It might even be this royal reserve right here. I don't know precisely where it is. I'd like to get a little bit more precise about this. But they're building a city. It hasn't shown up on the map yet. It's called Neom. The Neom project is a super structure city that exists in Saudi Arabia. Ooh, look at this. Oh, they've even got a bigger plan. Oh, goodness. It is going to be a large superstructure with big towering walls. They're pitching it as the city of the future. They're calling for investors. They're calling for this, but they know that their investors are China. They know what this is. And the goal is to create a huge superstructure city in a straight line, right? In a straight line, which is obviously to protect a rail. It's obviously to protect a rail. I want to be clear about something here, okay? As I'm talking about NEOM, I want to be really, really clear about something. I am the one that is postulating this. This is a theory. This is a theory, okay? So everything I've said up until this point, I've got really good sources for. Now we're wandering into the Canadian commie, okay? This is my observation. This is me. I haven't seen anybody else talking about this. This is something that I have put together. But all of the pieces fit. Saudi Arabia has recently joined BRICS, or is moving to join BRICS. It has moved away from the petrodollar. It is trading in yuan, in oil, with China. And they are building this superstructure city that is in a straight line directly facing the Belt and Road Initiative. I think that they are running that rail to NEOM specifically to run it underneath the Red Sea. I don't think that they're going to go over the Red Sea, although they might. They're quite capable of it. But I think they're going to build it under the Red Sea. And they're going to build it under the Red Sea, and it's going to come out on the other side, and it's going to connect with Cairo. And even more importantly, the Suez Canal. Once that rail goes into Egypt, it just explodes into Africa. It just explodes into Africa. And Africa is pivoting hard towards BRICS. Hard towards BRICS. This system, this rail system, means that if America blows up naval trade in China, it won't hurt so bad. It won't be such a big problem for China. It won't be so problematic. The real problem with your theory, with the idea that America will just go over to China and blow up their naval trade and then walk away, if America did that, the first economy that would collapse would be the United States. The United States economy is completely tied in to the Chinese economy. You never said blow up? Okay, the Americans do. The Pentagon does. I don't know how else you would prevent them from doing it. Block? Good luck with that. Like, for real, good luck with that. You're not going to set up a successful blockade. How would you do that? Like, look at it. You're gonna get boats all the way down to connect down here, and then you're gonna get what are you gonna do? You're gonna build a wall? America can't build a wall this long. They're gonna build a wall this long? In the water? Yeah, come on, man. No, come on. We gotta live in reality at some point. Okay, I'm gonna take a quick break. Go use the washroom. While I do that, I'm going to put a video on. Hopefully it doesn't get me demonetized. This is, you know what? It is going to get me demonetized. It's the Wall Street Journal. Yeah, I can't do it. That sucks. It's a good video. Sorry, guys. Okay, I have to go use the washroom. 1 second. Alrighty. Alrighty. Even got a little treat for my dog. So, Barry, what is your plan for that? To block Chinese trade? How would you do that? Like, straight up just take boats and put them in the port? Just block the ports directly? That's an act of war. China would consider it an act of war. And again, I really need to reiterate something, right? The American economy is largely tied up in China. That, oh goodness, now we're going to get into the history of the rise of the PRC. I love talking about this stuff, man. This is just amazing. The United States Barry, you tell me, where does all the trade go through? The United States, after the Vietnam War, part of the deal to end the Vietnam War and the Korean War and to normalize relations with China, right? Part of the deal was that America was going to ship its manufacturing to China to have the Chinese do all their manufacturing for cheap. Well, the Chinese are Marxists. That they understand that power doesn't originate from finance. That power originates from production, which the Americans seem to miss the memo on that because they don't read Marx. And so China has built up its productive force so powerfully that it is the manufacturing base for most of the world. And that includes the United States. So if the United States was to do what it is you say that they should do, the very first economy that would collapse would be the United States. Because China will stop trading with it. That if the United States starts bombing places or starts blockading places or starts destroying places. So, NEOM. Yeah, so you want to go back to NEOM. So NEOM, if the United States were to blockade NEOM or to cause problems in this area for NEOM, right? That's the reason why they're building big walls, right? It's the reason why they're building this critical juncture and this critical infrastructure. Over along the coast of Yemen, what ships does China have that they can send? I don't think I understand your comment, Barry. Sorry. And what we're seeing really in the world right now is how weak the United States has become militarily. That the United States is a very weak player in the world now. That the United States has a lot of military hardware. They've got a lot of military power in terms of their, tanks and planes and ships and guns and technology, right? They've got a lot of that kind of stuff. What they don't have is a lot of personnel. Right. Moreover, they don't have the political will. Like they can't just send the boys over like they did to Normandy, for example. Right. They can't do that. For example, the Ukraine situation. No American would go to Ukraine. If suddenly they said, "Okay, we're putting boots on the ground in Ukraine," literally no American would tolerate that. That the Ukrainian war right now is only tolerable because it's Ukrainians that are dying for it. That we send military hardware, but we don't send men, right? We don't send personnel. Same story with the Israeli genocide. We don't send men, right? So, and really what shows you how weak the United States military has become and how ineffectual it's become in the world is the Yemeni blockade of Israel. That Yemen basically, the Houthis, right, have basically taken up this territory. You can see how the water works, right? So here's Israel, right? Israel doesn't have a way to get ships into the Gulf of Aqaba. They've got to go through the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal is an extremely, extremely, extremely important piece of trade infrastructure. Marcus, good to see you. Hey, John, catch me up on the topic. I think you're caught up, Marcus. The Suez. Just take a look at the map. right? So if you're Israel, here's little Israel, you can only poop trade out into the Mediterranean Sea. So if you want to get goods to China, right, you got to go ding ding, right? You got to go all the way around Africa in order to get trade into China. Whereas with the Suez Canal, you just go poop. Ding ding. Much quicker. Right? Much quicker. Like literally 50% fuel savings. Right? Literally just a way shorter trip to do it that way. The Houthis in Yemen, because of the genocide of the Gazan people, of the Palestinian people, have created a blockade in the Red Sea. Basically, if a ship goes through the Red Sea into the Gulf of Aden, out into the Arabian Sea, that the Houthis think have Israeli goods on it, they'll open fire on it. They don't even have boats. They just shoot at it. So what this has done is it has made all of the private industry, because America runs on a privatized system, basically say, yep, we're not going to load Israeli goods onto our boats. This has reduced Israeli trade by as much as 40% and has increased their shipping costs dramatically. The Houthis are a ragtag band of Islamic, like America would call them Islamic terrorists, right? That are just shooting into the Red Sea, and the Americans can't do anything about it. They launched an operation in the early days. I think it was called Operation Prosperity, something like that. Failed immediately. And why did it fail? Because you can't run an army without personnel, and mercenaries don't give a fuck about geopolitics. That America is learning something that Machiavelli, No, and I'm answering this question. Barry is saying that's all there, what we have to block. You just answered your question. Great. America can't do it. And I'm telling you why. Right now. Why America's military is so weak and pathetic that they can no longer actually be effective in the world. And why they lack the military competence and the capability to actually be competent in the world anymore. We have the Air Force to do it. Okay, good luck. Here's the reason why that's not working, Barry. I'm gonna really lay it out to you, okay? Reason number one. America is really, really struggling with recruitment. They don't have the personnel. It's important to remember that right now America is supporting 3 fronts, right? 3 fronts in a global conflict. Front number 1 is the Ukraine war. They're sending a lot of material into Ukraine in order to maintain this conflict. Okay. Number 2, Israel itself. That's the second front. They are currently fighting the Iranians and the Syrians and the Jordanians. Not really the Iraqis, in a force that's called Hezbollah, right? So they need to send material, and it's very likely that they have personnel in Israel. And then the third front is, of course, the United States-Mexican border. This requires a lot of personnel and a lot of material to maintain, and is rife with conflict and rife with difficulty. And this is actually extremely well reported on. They're very open about this. Because this is considered a border crisis, right? Well, it's not considered a border, it's a border crisis. And so the United States feels justified in being as open and transparent as they possibly can in what they're doing on the border, with like full-blown concentration camps, the whole thing, right? And so your idea during this, Barry says no one wants to join the military under the zombie we have as a president now. Well, he has stepped down. Biden has stepped down. So it's going to be Kamala or Trump. Good old Donald Trump. He's going to come in. He's going to clean all these conflicts up. The Ukrainian war is going to go away. We're going to make a deal, the best deal. The best deal you've ever seen. It's going to be the greatest deal. You're going to love this deal. So nobody wants to join the military. Problem one, they don't have the personnel. It takes time to train these people. It takes time to, like you say, the Air Force. Okay, cool. I don't care if you have 200 million fighter planes. If you have 5 pilots, you've got 5 planes. And if one of those planes gets shot down, you've got 4 planes. And Yemen really revealed this to the world, by the way, that the Americans weren't able to go in there and destroy Yemen. Operation Prosperity failed. They can't handle a ragtag band of rebels. So that's problem one. Problem two, and I actually think this is a much more significant problem. Oh, first of all, going back to problem one, the real reason why they can't get any recruitment is because Americans have lost faith in the empire, in the imperial project. Americans know that the Iraq War was fraudulent. They know that what we're doing in the Middle East is fraudulent. They saw the Libyan war. They know that the American military is a fraudulent organization that you should not join. That's the real truth of it. So problem number two, and this I actually think is a larger problem because it's much more systemic. This is a much more significant issue. The first issue you could resolve in a single generation simply by attempting to be competent, right? If the American leadership and the American military suddenly looked at each other and went, everybody says we're incompetent and stupid, and that's why they're not joining, because we're too stupid to govern. Well, maybe we should have a come to Jesus moment and like reinvest in ourselves and take a look at ourselves and maybe make some competent decisions. Do some competent military actions. Like, let's focus Operation Competence. Let's do something that convinces the American people that we're competent, right? And if they dedicated themselves to that, they could probably win the American people back in a generation. America's a very fascist country. And so I think you could win people back simply by competence. Content says, the president is not the reason anyone joins the military, to which Barry responds, I can tell Content has never served. Why would you join a military if you don't believe in your commander-in-chief? But I think it's worse than that, Barry. I think it's not just the commander-in-chief. I think it's the whole project. So, okay, problem one, okay? So, competence, faith in military, okay? I think we can have a larger discussion about commander-in-chief or military competence or any of that kind of stuff, so on and so forth. But I think that we can put a circle around it and call it faith in the military project. And I think Americans have lost faith in the military project, and I think you see that in the recruitment numbers. People don't have faith in the American military anymore. Americans don't have faith in the American military to be operating for the interests of Americans. I think we can circle that and we can have a debate in there about what that is, but I think we can all agree that that's the case. Problem one. Problem two, I think this is a much more difficult problem to solve. And I actually think it's deeply concerning, way more concerning, which is that the American military has largely been privatized into mercenary groups, right? What you might call private contractors is what we call them. Those are mercenaries, right? So, Conton, you were in the Navy? You better be careful here, Conton. I know how Army men talk about the Navy. I didn't know that, Conton. Conton, you were in the Navy? How long were you in the Navy, my man? I'm learning new things about you every day, my man. No wonder you swear like a sailor. Marcus writes, I served under Obama in the infantry in Afghanistan. It's only a factor to cheeseburger eating Confederate wave players who haven't served either. Okay. So, the United States military has been privatized, by and large. Military contractors are a huge component of the American military today. Private military companies like Blackwater, now it's named something like G or something. They keep changing the name because they keep getting bad press. And the American military doesn't want people to know that their military has been largely privatized. So these private military forces, you served after 2003. How long were you in, dude? 3 years, dude. Wow. So 2003, dude, you were in Iraq, eh? Like, you were in this conflict, eh? I didn't know this about you, dude. So, were you in the Persian Gulf? Where the fuck were you? This is crazy, dude. You've been in my chat for like a year. What the hell? You're like one of my most like assiduous commentators in the Discord. I literally had to create a channel for you, my man. You're just hiding this one in your back pocket? You just got, by the way, I was in the Navy for 3 years after 2003 during the Iraq War. Click. Jesus Christ, bro. Okay. Sorry, a little bit derailed because one of my regulars just like slapped me with some personal knowledge. Dude, content, how are you so cool? You're just getting cooler by the day. No, I didn't. I conscientiously objected when they tried sending me to Iraq, and I sabotaged my training. Bud, you're the coolest person I know. For real, you're the coolest person I know. If I was gay and you were gay, we could be gay together. All right. So the privatization of the military is a huge, massive systemic problem that I don't think America can recover from. First of all, it follows basic Machiavellian principles. Basic Machiavellian principles are that you can't trust mercenaries during periods of war. The reason why you can't trust mercenaries is they fight for money and for nothing else. So there's all kinds of historical precedent to show that mercenaries will flip sides at crucial moments during military conflicts. They fight for whoever pays more and for whoever pays better. They're also extremely cowardly. They're not going to die for your political cause because they don't care about your political cause. They care about money. And once they have your money, they will leave if their life is put on the line. This is why America is struggling to be an offensive military force, because mercenaries can't be used as offensive military forces. Mercenaries are willing to do special operations, coups. CIA uses them often, coups. And they're also willing to be put into civilian populations to suppress civilian populations, right? So they love being bullies and the top dogs in civilian populations. The CIA literally hire these guys to walk around the streets of Afghanistan murdering people, right? And so, yeah, Blackwater had to rename because of such horrible conduct, of course. Well, I mean, they're mercenaries, right? Like, that's... When I was a kid, I was like, what? And now I'm just like, yeah. Just read The Prince. Read Machiavelli. Machiavelli nails mercenaries, man. He just nails them. There's, like, no new notes needed. He's just got them. And it's exactly true. They operate that way. And the United States is largely... I shouldn't say largely, but, like, insignificant portion... is largely a mercenary force at this point. They're privatized military contractors. this actually is a huge, enormous, massive, huge, large issue for America. Because you can't get military objectives completed, and you can't be effective geopolitically with a mercenary army. And the mercenaries will abandon you. They will find people who will pay them more. I also think that this makes the United States internally very vulnerable. Very, very vulnerable. Because America is essentially defunding its own military, right? And transferring those funds into the hands of private contractors who will essentially work for the highest bidder. And eventually the highest bidder could be someone like, let's say, Elon Musk. Right? That this is how systems die, and this is how systems transfer power. That military forces gravitate towards who has the most wealth, power, or who could position the mercenaries best. Barry, you want to be careful about, like... Compton, you were not trained by Blackwater. Were you trained by Blackwater? I mean, Blackwater does... this is what I'm saying, though, Barry. Like, America uses private military contractors, right? And so if they need to train people, they'll just hire a private military contractor to train, right? That's how it works. And of course, because they're a private military group, they don't really need to abide by a code of conduct. No, Barry, I just don't know that you kind of understand what's going on in the United States military, right? There's a great book. I forget the name of the book all of a sudden, but it's about Blackwater. Maybe I can just look it up quickly. What's the name of that book? The History of Blackwater. I mean, you could just look at the Wikipedia. Blackwater was one of several private security firms employed following the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan. BSC was originally formed as Delaware LLC. It was one of over 60. Right? Former Navy SEAL officer Eric Prince. It was renamed G Services in 2009, and then again renamed to Academy in 2011, after it was acquired by a group of private investors. In 2014, Academy merged with the Triple Canopy to form Constellus Holdings. Right? So, like, I don't know, it's just extremely well established that there are private military contractors that exist throughout the United States military. I think it's highly, I think it's just highly possible. Like, it probably wasn't Blackwater, but it was like those guys. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't that name. Yeah, imagine that multiple investment firms funneled capital into the organizations. Yeah. Like, my perception that what makes this scary and what makes this so concerning is that it is perfectly possible, and there's tons of historical precedent for this, that these private military companies become just as powerful or more powerful than the national military. Right? That America has dedicated itself so assiduously to this concept of privatization that they're privatizing even their own military. I keep using this word, assiduously. With great care and perseverance, leaders worked assiduously to hammer out an action plan. Assiduously. With great care and perseverance. No, I'm using that word wrong in this context. It's not assiduously. It's carelessly. They're being very careless. And it really shows you that the United States doesn't actually care about its own national interests anymore. It's not actually interested in its own national interests. Because it's essentially taking taxes that it collects from the United States population, and instead of funneling it into a national military, it's funneling it into private military. This is an enormous problem for the future of the United States, and it's going to make it very, very difficult to, as the United States declines, which it has to decline, it's going to make it very difficult to maintain order in the United States, which is why the response from the nation, at the national level, is cop cities. That their hope, moving into the new era, is that they will have cop cities, a cop city in every state, and that those cop cities will remain loyal to the federal government. Questions loom on that. Barry continues. I come from a military family. I grew up on a naval station. Norfolk grandfather was captain, I think, of CV-71, now works in Lockheed Martin. Yeah, right? So started in the military, started in the national forces, moved into private industry, right? Dad's in Marines. I've had uncles that served in the Iraq War. I think I have a good idea of what our military is capable of. Yeah, so you have an understanding that America is fully capable of losing a war in Iraq, right? Which they did. And losing a war in Afghanistan, which they did. Right? So the United States has the capability to go in, do a lot of damage, and lose. Right? Like, Biden pulled out of Afghanistan, and literally the week after he pulled out, the Taliban took over. All of the institutions, everything that was put in place that they claimed would actually allow Afghanistan to continue as a United States colony, basically wiped out in a week. The Taliban took over. So there's your big military success in Afghanistan. Iraq has essentially been completely fractured and factionalized. If it wasn't for the fact that these borders were drawn by imperial forces in the first place, Iraq would be 3 countries right now. You would basically have a line here. Erbil would be in the north. You'd have a line here, more or less. Basra in the south. And then Baghdad would be the one in the middle. And Iraq would be 3 countries. Because that's essentially how it's being governed. The laws that get passed in Baghdad are ignored by the south and the north. And Baghdad is largely still... it's still the imperial force. It's still the coup government, basically. And the... Oh, I'm definitely going to get this wrong. There's 2 religious factions, the Sunnis and the Shiites. And the Sunnis are in the north, and the Shiites are in the south. I might have that wrong. I might have that inverted. In either case, one religious force owns the south and one owns the north. And Baghdad, essentially the central corridor, is controlled by the empire. Iran is Shia. Okay, I'm gonna step back from this because I don't know enough. I don't know enough. That's a very specialized piece of knowledge, and I've looked into what happened in Iraq post the American failed invasion. The Kurds. Okay. Barry says withdrawing and losing are 2 different things. It's not our fault the country's military tucked tail and ran. So you just want to call your loss a withdrawal, okay. We went there, did what there was to do, which was nothing. Stayed for 20 years. I don't know why. But we did train the country's military and sold them $3 billion of military equipment. They tucked tail and ran. Because they never wanted you there, dude. Like for real. Like, the story you just told me is, like, not much different from saying, like, I kicked in that girl's door and kidnapped her, made her have a couple of sons, and the moment I turned my back, she shot me. I don't get it. You don't? Like, you don't get it? Like, you don't get it? I don't understand. How do you not get it? She should be grateful. We had a beautiful family and a beautiful life together after I kidnapped her. Like, America essentially forces itself on Afghanistan and Iraq, right? Essentially forces itself in the region, and then says they should be grateful? What are you talking about? That the Afghanis and the Iraqis basically, and incidentally the Iranians and the Saudi Arabians and the Yemen and the Omani and the Turkmenistans and the Azerbaijani and the Jordanians and the Syrians and the Pakistanis and the Egyptians and the Sudanese and the Ethiopians and the Somalians and the Libyans and the Algerians and the Nigerians and the Chads and the South Sudans and the Central Africa. Am I making my point clear? They're basically just dealing with it. That America just goes into the region, fucks around, says, well, we're going to just dump a bunch of money on you. You better maintain everything. Well, see you later. They didn't want you in the first place. They didn't want you there. Fucking nobody wanted you there. Literally nobody wanted you there. The goal in the Middle East, which incidentally the United States is failing at, pretty badly actually, but the goal in the Middle East was to create so much dysfunction and disorder that the Middle East could never rebuild itself into an empire. That the worst case scenario for America, given its perspective of the world, is that Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Afghanistan and Pakistan would join forces and create a federated body. Like the Ottoman Empire. Like if Iran, Turkey, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia got together, Syria got together, right? Like, America's trying to build a military outpost here with Israel, and it takes a minute. And so in order to protect this military outpost and ensure that Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey don't join forces and then destroy it, well, you go in and destroy Iraq, Afghanistan, fuck around. The Saudis have done an absolutely brilliant job. The Iranians really, really did a good job of not collapsing. I think the Iranians are the one that really get the big round of applause, honestly. That history is going to look at Iran and be like, holy shit, dude. That was 20 years of just fucking warfare and death and devastation. And they withstood it. They withstood it. Just their borders secured. Sure, Trump assassinated a guy once. But, like, it's a... but now it's backfiring. And it's backfiring because there's the Chinese, right? Did you know that Afghanistan shares a border with China? Right? It's a very small border, obviously, through the Wakhan National Park, through the Wakhan Corridor. Like, China has been getting Iran and Saudi Arabia to sit down and talk peace deals and talk about trade alliances. And Iran and Saudi Arabia have been looking at China being like, this is a good idea. Right? This is a good idea. And the Saudi Arabians, the fucking Machiavellian evil geniuses that the Saudis are. Dude, I always have to preface that when I talk about the Saudis because if I didn't, I think people would think, this guy really loves the Saudis. This guy's he's a communist, but he's always singing the Saudis' praises and talking about all the good decisions that they make. This guy, what's going on with this guy in Saudi Arabia? So I always have to preface it that Saudi Arabia is just like, these guys are, the Saudi princes are Machiavellian evil geniuses, man. They really are. They're always on the right side of power, and they always have the support of their people. It's actually really impressive. Like, if you really, really want to learn how to govern and learn about governance from this kind of capitalist monarchist position, you got to be learning from the Saudis, dude. The Saudi Arabians, man. They know how to do it. They just know what they're doing. and they know what to do, and they know who to pressure, and they make good decisions. Right? Content writes, I'm going to listen to the Red Banner is Raised tonight, anti-imperialist communist music. Makes me feel better. I hope you do, dude. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be accurate. Barry, I just don't... I don't know that it would be fair to label someone like Barry with any kind of label. I think that Barry is just trying to figure it out. Right? Like, that's all. And Barry's background... And Barry, I do have to say to you, I get people coming in who are in your kind of position all the time, and they're very rude to me and condescending. I've never once felt like you've condescended to me. I've never once felt you've been rude to me or insulting. So I really want to thank you for that, Barry. Thank you for coming in and being so gracious, even though I wouldn't be surprised to find out that you disagree with a lot of what I have to say. I think that it's been it's just been your basic human kindness that I think is really noteworthy. And so thank you for that. I appreciate that. And Barry responds, label me as an American. That is the most American thing that American can say. Dude. Straight up, cowboy hat, the big airplane glasses, cigar, beer, burger, guns, the bullets, just like a gun on the back, riding an American Eagle. Call me an American. You're goddamn right. You're goddamn right. Dude, I love that. That was really good. I needed that laugh. That was good. Well, guys, that's a good place to end. I feel like I've reached the end of this one. Thank you, each and every one of you, for being here. God bless each and every one of you. Donald, good to see you again, Donald. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.